Now You Know BC is brought to you by Return It. Don't trash your empty beverage containers. Return them for the deposit refund.
Welcome to Now You Know BC. I'm Bob Kronbauer, also known as BC Bob, and on this show I introduce you to interesting people, places to go, things to see, things that have happened in the past. You'll hear our collective stories, and this week I'm bringing you some tales about animals who have escaped captivity or who have been let go in the wild in this province. From elephants on the loose in Cranbrook to camels who may still be roaming the Cariboo, and a frankenfish released into a Burnaby lagoon, to thousands of rabbits you see munching on grass in Nanaimo and elsewhere, and also in this studio that are making me allergic, and that's why my voice sounds like this week. There's animals on the loose, or at least some of them are. Most of the animals I'm going to tell you about are dead. Let's go. Did you know that 14 circus elephants once stampeded through Cranbrook and that some of them hid in the woods for months before they were recaptured? It's true. It was 1926 when the circus rolled into town on a train. And while they were unloading the elephant car, something caused a stampede and all the elephants ran rampant through the town. They knocked down hedges and porches, they ate fruit off the trees, and they scared the crap out of everybody who lived there. 11 of the 14 escapees were rounded up in the first day, and the final 3 that were left to their own devices were named Myrtle, Tilly, and Charlie Ed. I don't know why Charlie Ed got 2 first names, but he did. About a week in, they found Tilly. She was snared by Tanaha trackers and taken back to the circus folks who had to keep their train in town, waiting for their lost elephants to be caught before they could move on to their next stop. Myrtle was on the loose for about a month when they found her with broken toenails, 2 bullet wounds, and suffering from pneumonia. She was in rough shape. So they put her out of her misery right there in the woods, and since she was so huge, they just left her there. And I'm told that local Boy Scout troops would go visit her remains for months after she passed away. Eventually, someone went out and retrieved Myrtle's head and one of her feet and sent them to the University of Alberta in Edmonton, where they remain to this day. Because I actually touched a piece of this skin that they have in the Cranbrook archives, and it is equally as disgusting as you think it is. There are little hairs sticking out of it. Anyways, it took them 6 weeks to finally find the last missing elephant, Charlie Ed, the elephant with 2 names. They set up a snare and caught him by a watering hole he'd been spotted at. And then they walked him back into the town, and it took a full day. That's how far he got away from Cranbrook. The town held a huge celebration for him where he was literally christened with a new name by pouring a bottle of champagne onto his head and feeding him toast. Maybe it was sandwiches, but I think it was toast. His new name was Cranbrook Ed. They loaded him onto the train he escaped from originally, and they trucked him off with the rest of the elephants onto the next town that they were going to. They pulled him out of the circus a few years later, and he went on to star in the film Clive of India with Loretta Young. But his troublemaking days were not over. Cranbrook Ed may have had a peaceful end to his life as he was retired to the San Francisco Zoo, but a couple years after he was put there, he gored his handler to death. And his sentence for that crime, which may have been warranted, was death. He was put down by a firing squad in 1936, but his memory is kept alive in Cranbrook. Ask anybody in that town what the deal is with the elephant statue, local craft beers named after an elephant, everything else that's elephant themed in Cranbrook.
This is the second year the Cranbrook-based artist has put his giant puppet on display.
They'll tell you the story of Cranbrook Ed. And now you know. Each week I show you an artifact that I think is an important part of BC's history, and sometimes they actually are. Today's is from the fairly recent past, and it's a part of our natural history. Alien predator, invasive predator, frankenfish were all used to describe the snakehead fish that is not native to BC and which someone had put into the lagoon. Alive, of course. city officials from Burnaby, folks from the Ministry of Environment, as well as a team of biologists were activated to hunt down and capture this fish, to put everyone's fears of, well, a fairly small fish that eats other fish to rest. Now, the real concern was not that the frankenfish was going to eat the children of Burnaby, but that it could breed with other snakeheads and wreak havoc on the ecosystem. But they drained the entire pond and they caught the frankenfish and they killed it right there. The Burnaby frankenfish in a jar was shipped off to the collection of the Royal BC Museum, where it remains to this day in a medium-sized jar. You can't see this specimen. It's not on display, but I would absolutely recommend visiting the museum next time you're in Victoria. And if you need somebody to take care of your fish while you're there, give me a call. I don't want you chucking any fish into the lagoon. Now, coming up next, we've got a couple people who are gonna show you some rabbits. Welcome back to Now You Know BC. Today we're talking about animals escaping captivity or being let go. Allison Babichuk and Meg Andrews from an organization called Rabbitats. Welcome to the show. I see you brought some friends and I'm allergic to them. I'm sorry for this.
Thank you. Yes, we sure did.
What is Rabbitats?
So we are a fully volunteer-run nonprofit focused on rescuing rabbits, essentially. So kind of what Rabbitats does is colony rescue. So bunnies, such as these bunnies, do really well when they live in large groups. And a lot of the bunnies that you see out there, like Jericho Beach is a really good example. That would be a colony of bunnies. And our goal is to rescue them, spay and neuter, and then contain them so that they don't continue to cause problems out there.
Like all together, you'll get a whole bunch of them?
I mean, that's kind of the goal. Our capacities are very limited right now. We run pretty much solely on donations, and we're always looking for new places to host colonies. So unfortunately, there are still so many rabbits out there that have yet to be rescued, and we just don't have homes for them at the moment.
Right. If I'm out at Jericho Beach, what should I feed them?
Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, please don't feed the rabbits at Jericho Beach. It makes them fat. It's harder for them to run from predators. And also, if they're really well fed, they'll have much bigger litters, which we do not want. We don't want more bunnies.
No, we don't want more.
No.
How does this happen? Like that there's so many rabbits out at Jericho and at 999, all those places I listed, those are tons of rabbits.
Basically, we consider them to be domestic ferals. So like you said, they're not wild rabbits, they are domestic rabbits. Most of them are the offspring of dumped pets, and some of them are actually dumped pets. So for example, Sugar, little gray girl in there,
Yep.
She was found in a parking lot at Canadian Tire in Richmond, and someone just dumped her, and all of the feral rabbits around her started attacking her because they knew that she was a pet bunny. They weren't going to accept her. So when the person who rescued her actually went, she just ran right up to her, begged to be taken.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in 2008, Kelowna paid $54,000 to cull their entire population. What is your guys' stance on that?
Well, obviously our organization isn't pro-cull. Part of Kelowna's big success actually was larger restrictions on spaying and neutering rabbits. So any rabbit that is adopted or bought from a breeder must be spayed or neutered. And that has shown to really contain the rabbit population much more efficiently than a cull would.
Has the government ever considered banning the sale of them? I know in Burnaby they banned the sale of turtles. In Vancouver you can't buy a dog at a pet store, that sort of thing. Has the provincial government ever considered it?
No, and to be honest, it's not really, it is an issue, but it's not the biggest issue. Like the really big issue is breeders and backyard breeders and all of these bunnies being sold irresponsibly. They're not spayed or neutered, and then the juvenile phase hits. So a lot of these bunnies, they go home when they're babies, they're super cute, but they grow, and when they become teenagers, the hormones kick in, it's time to get spayed and neutered. That's kind of when people are like, okay, I can't handle this anymore, and then all the rescues are full for intake, closed for intake, so they kind of have no choice but to dump them, and because they're not fixed, it just keeps creating more and more rabbits.
You're saying people don't have a choice but to dump their animals?
Sometimes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, housing crisis.
Okay.
Finding pet-friendly housing is really difficult.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have to people will, sneak bunnies in because they're quite quiet, but it's not a sustainable way. So that's a big issue, is the housing crisis.
Yeah, misinformation's another big part of the crisis. They're seen as wildlife. It's why bunnies are one of the most dumped pet, because there are some wild rabbits. A lot fewer rabbits are actually wild than you would assume. The only wild breed in BC, and they're not native to BC.
Yeah, they're all invasive.
Yeah, they're all invasive, are cottontails. So they're specifically the brown, they look a little different.
Almost like her coloring.
Almost like her, but...
What is her deal? She's a big rabbit.
Yeah,
There's
yes.
this one too.
So Big Girl is a Flemish giant rabbit. She's actually an escaped meat rabbit. She was found in pretty horrific conditions, and she was one of the lucky ones. She escaped being eaten. Yeah.
If people wanted to adopt a rabbit, what makes a good rabbit owner?
Being able to provide them with enough space and enough enrichment and keeping them on a proper diet. Bunnies have very sensitive digestive systems, so they always need to have access to fresh hay. That's the most important part. They also cannot be kept in cages. That's a common misconception. People think of small animal, you keep them in a cage.
I thought that's totally what you were thinking.
But they're more like a cat or a dog, and they need room to run around,
Do they poop?
jump. So they're actually litter box trained. So they like to actually eat their hay and poop at the same time, so they know where to do their business in the litter box.
Eating and pooping at the same time.
Yeah, very efficient.
I like them a little bit more now.
Yeah.
Let's say somebody wanted to adopt one. Is there somewhere where they could meet the rabbits or see them?
Yeah, so we're actually partnered with the Bunny Cafe in East Vancouver, and that is a great source just to go and meet some rabbits. A lot of people have never really interacted with rabbits before on a pet basis, so
They could know if they're allergic to them like I am.
They would know pretty
Maybe
quick.
you didn't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks so much for coming in, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to go to a break. When we come back, Nina is going to be talking to people in the streets. Welcome back to the show. Right now we've got Nina. She's out on the street talking to people. It's Street Survey. Let's go.
I'm Nina Savage, and this is Street Survey. We're here at Stanley Park, home to over 500 species. Now let's talk to the only one I know how to. So, as a resident of Stanley Park, what are the craziest animals you've seen?
I went to Lake Tahoe and we're on a little hike and we saw a baby bear running through the forest. It was so cute, but we got out of there because I know better than to stay around for the mama bear to show up.
I think it was funny to see actually people from overseas seeing our spiders, because we have the big hairy huntsman.
They're fun. They're
And we're
scary.
used to the lot of spiders, but yeah, the kangaroos, people get very up close and too close and they kick you and they can do a lot of damage. Yeah.
One time when I was 10, I was running through the forest and I got attacked by an owl.
When I was kayaking years ago in Johnson Strait with the orca whales.
Yeah, it was a great horned owl, back in Surrey, and it attacked me 7 times, in a row.
When I was 10, I used to do cheer, and in this stadium, there was an open roof, and I splattered right on my uniform, and I was really pissed.
Yeah, it left big gashes in the back of my head. I had bald spots there for a while. It was crazy.
Where did you get that amazing hat?
I got from the Universal Studio in Japan.
What's your favorite animal that you've seen in Vancouver or British Columbia?
Deers, definitely. I love deers.
Well, I really like the bald-headed eagles that I see even here in Stanley Park. Yeah.
What animal would you have as your next pet?
I really like the lynx, and I've seen you can own sanctuaries for lynx. I've actually checked it out. It looks really, I guess, a fun experience.
Maybe a bear. I think bears are really cool.
Well, bears are, if you keep your distance and you're careful, I'm not worried about them.
Yes, this is Tim.
Tim!
Yes, the bear's Tim, and this is Bob.
Oh my gosh, amazing. What would you get up to in Vancouver as a bear tomorrow if you woke up?
What would I do?
Yeah.
In this weather, I'd go back to bed.
Me too. Thanks for standing still and taking a moment to chat with us. BC is home to an amazing array of animals, but be sure to educate yourself on how you interact with our local wildlife. This is Street Survey, and I'm Nina Savage.
We're going on a BC road trip to Kamloops, which is not far from my hometown of Vernon, but it almost feels like it's in another country for some reason. I can't explain why. It's a little bit drier there. The town is located right on the banks of the Thompson River, and it's on the traditional territory of the Kamloops to Secwepemc people, and it's not too far from Wells Gray Park. And the best waterfall I have ever seen, Helmkin Falls. That waterfall is nuts. Like, I didn't even know I was coming across a waterfall, and then I saw it, and it's wild. You gotta go there. There's quite a few hotels to stay in downtown Kamloops, and if you stay north of Highway 1, you'll be within walking distance of all the best spots downtown. The last time I was here, I stayed at the Best Western Plus. It was nice. I would absolutely recommend it. And I've got 3 things you need to check out during your trip to Kamloops. Number 1 is the BC Wildlife Park. They're a charity that's governed by a board, and their motto is conservation through education. Bears, cougars, bobcats, bugs, lizards, porcupines, lots of birds, all animals that live in BC. They're all there. You can go, you can't pet them, but you can hang out with them. And they had the only spirit bear that's in captivity in North America, which they built $1 million enclosure for. It's illegal to have one in custody. I will tell you all about all of in another story for another day. It's a very long story. Number 2 thing to check out in Kamloops is the farmer's market. And now every town in BC has a farmer's market. If your town doesn't have one, send me an email and I will call your mayor and I will yell at them. But just because you have a farmer's market doesn't mean it's a good one. Kamloops is a good one. The last time I went, it was memorable for a number of reasons, and the main one was bannock. Some Secwepemc folks had a booth where they were rolling it all out, throwing it into the fryer right there on the street. Fresh bannock is tough to beat, and it's one of the best memories that I have of the farmer's market, was sinking my teeth into some hot, floury goodness. Lastly, but not least, breweries. I haven't had a drink in a few months, and that's my problem, not yours. So your first stop when you get into town is going to be the Noble Pig, which is a brew pub where they have excellent food and, more importantly, excellent beer, right downtown. When you finished your pints and your dinner, head across the street to Red Collar Brewing, which is named that after the owner's dog's collar. Dog was a black lab named Goosey. She wore it while she was alive. She passed away in 2016. Rest in peace, Goosey. They've got a great selection of beers, and they also run a distillery out of the same place there. There's a few other breweries in town that you can and you should check out. Just look them up, and when you're there, tip one back from me, if you would. Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about animals on the loose in British Columbia. We're going to do an animal-themed giveaway, but first, a story. In fact, one of my favorite stories of all time. Did you know that 23 camels were once brought to BC from the Gobi Desert to serve as pack animals, and that many of them were eventually just let go to live their lives roaming in the Cariboo region? It's true. In 1862, they were purchased for $300 each. They've come to be known as the Cariboo camels, and up until the time that they arrived, the conventional wisdom was that mules were the best pack animals to use here. But someone suggested that the terrain these camels came from would make them better suited for the job. They made the trip from Lillooet to the Goldfields and back many, many times, loaded up with twice the amount of gear that mules could carry, making them twice as efficient. But it didn't take long for people using them to find out how nasty they were. These are not nice animals. They spit on people, they scared the horses, they ate the gold miners' tents and their pants that were hung up to dry, and any other supplies they could get their stinky, scary mouths on. The worst thing is that they were dangerous, and not just these ones. Camels in general, because they have earned the nickname of skull crushers, because given the chance, they've been known to literally bite on the top of people's heads and crush them like a grape. When the road came in, instead of mules or camels, they were able to start using horses and carriages, which are obviously a much more efficient packing method than mules or awful camels. And to prove that the camels were equipped for the BC terrain, Richard Wright went so far as to conduct a modern-day experiment where he bought camels of his own and walked them from Lillooet to the goldfields and back a number of times on the original route. This is present day. I have met this man. This is not way back in the history of BC. He had hoped to make it a business venture where people like you and me could go on a trip with these nasty camels. And unfortunately for him, it didn't work out. And where did all the camels go when they stopped using them? Not Richard's camels, I mean. He kept those on his farm. I mean the original 23 camels that were brought here in the 1800s. Some of them were given away to ranches and to people who kept them as pets and as work animals on their land. The rest were just released into the wilderness. And there were unconfirmed wild camel sightings for decades after they did this. One of them was actually shot in the woods by a dude who said he mistook it for a bear. He wound up earning the nickname Grizzly, and the meat from that camel was served up at a local hotel. The menu said it was Grizzly's bear. I wonder what it tasted like. But there is a very small chance that there might still be wild camels roaming around the Cariboo. Who knows if these things bred or not? And maybe they're out there and they just want to be left alone. I'm giving away the best dog collar and leash made in British Columbia. In fact, they're made in my neighborhood of Mount Pleasant in Vancouver at a store called Good Boy Collective. My family and I bought one of these for our new dog Homer a few months ago, and we love it. They make them to order right there in the store out of a vegan material called biothane. This was actually meant for horse leashes originally. This stuff holds up to 3,000 pounds, which means that your dog is never going to escape and take off into the wilderness like the elephants or the camels or the rabbits that were running around here earlier. You can learn more about these leashes and collars at shopgoodboy.com, and the winner of my draw will get a collar and a leash in the color of their choice. To enter to win, just sign up to my weekly newsletter at bcbob.ca and I'll be randomly selecting a winner. That's the show for this week. Big thanks to the folks at Rabbitats, the BC Wildlife Park, the Royal BC Museum, Good Boy Collective, and lastly, thank you to all the conservation officers in BC who are out there trying to make sure people don't do things like introduce invasive frankenfish to our lakes and rivers. I hope you learned something this week, and I hope you never decide to release an animal, a rabbit, into the wild. Please don't do that. But please do follow me on Instagram. Check out my merch at bcbob.ca and watch more episodes of this show on CHEK+. I'll see you next week when we'll explore more stories about this great province of ours. And now you know BC.
Now you know BC is brought to you by Return It. Don't trash your empty beverage containers, return them for the deposit refund.